Good evening. Welcome to Queer News Tonight. This is the world's first and only LGBTQ+ daily evening television news, broadcasting live and available on demand, available on all smart televisions, including Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, and Facebook. It's time to queer up the news. It's Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023. We are live and literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we are going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
I'm your anchor at Queer News Tonight, Jasmen Rogers. This evening, we bring you the news of and perspective representing the LGBTQ+ community from South Florida, America, and across our planet. We are celebrating LGBTQ+ Black History Month with this special Black edition of Queer News Tonight. Our anchors tonight represent the diversity of our rich Black LGBTQ+ community.
This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ+ evening news show. Whatever happens in LGBTQ+ news, you will see it and hear it.
Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, is a nonprofit 501c3 media company in the same model of PBS and NPR, but designed for the LGBTQ+ community. Our mission is to support the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ+ community. We want to inform and educate the key issues of our Black community: Latino, lesbian, trans, students and youth, seniors, HIV and AIDS healthcare, business, political advocacy, and faith. Help us support our community.
We are part of one of the largest LGBTQ+ media companies in America, Hotspot Magazine and Happening Out Television Network.
Our magazine is celebrating 38 years of the LGBTQ+ experience, and our television news, talk, and entertainment shows support our mission to educate the LGBTQ+ and broader community.
This Queer News Tonight Black Edition is a special news presentation to focus on the importance of LGBTQ+ Black History Month, and our anchors represent that incredible diversity in our beautiful Black LGBTQ+ community. Let's welcome, representing our trans community, Adrianna Tender. She is program coordinator with Trans Inclusive Group and the owner of Tender Loving Care Trans Mentoring on the National Board of Governors of HRC, and as a trans woman of color, a leading trans activist in America. Next, representing our Gen Z and young Black LGBTQ+ community is Elijah Manley. Elijah is an advocate for the young LGBTQ+ issue. The youngest person to ever run for the Florida House of Representatives, he gives us a unique perspective, especially in our community fight against Don't Say Gay and the hateful culture war politics we are witnessing from across America. Next, representing our drag queen community is Auntie Main, a comedian and legitimate theater performer. Auntie Main challenges all the preconceived notions of being Black, a bearded drag queen, and expectations from the world around us. Next, representing our healthcare community is Paul Thomas. He has long experience in the healthcare field, especially in advocating for HIV issues. Paul is a longtime South Florida advocate and board member of Miami Beach Pride. And finally, we have 3 more of the top Black voices in our LGBTQ+ community that will join us shortly. We are the reporters for Queer News Tonight, Black Edition. And this evening, we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ+ community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and here are the bullet points of the queer news for today, Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023.
First, let's queer up trans rights. Trans and Black LGBTQ community. New poll shows Black Americans split on gender and trans equality issues. According to a new poll by Pew Research, Black Americans remain firmly in support of gender equality, but are split when it comes to transgender and non-binary issues. Nearly 70% of Black adults think the U.S. has not gone far enough in giving women equal rights with men. And 86% think that mothers and fathers should share parenting responsibilities. However, When it comes to accepting transgender and non-binary people, the issues gets a little more complex. Only 36% of Black adults say that society has not gone far enough in accepting Black people who are transgender. However, 31% say that the level is just right. Furthermore, 29% say that it has gone too far. Not surprising, views also differ depending on their political perspective. Just 48% of self-identifying Black conservatives think that it's important to address equality for Black transgender people, while 69% of liberals believe it is important to do so. Religion also plays a large factor, with those attending religious services weekly being 17% more likely to say views on transgender and non-binary issues in society are changing too quickly. Well, y'all, I think this is really a lot to unpack when I think about this. You know, when I think about it in the perspective of being a Black trans woman, I think that me as a Black trans woman, and looking at each one of you and you being Black, of course I identify as being Black. When I think about you as a woman and the disparities that you go through with healthcare and men trying to tell you what you can do to take care of your body, I feel the same way that you do with people trying to tell the government and men trying to tell me how I can take care of my body. You know, I feel that the social justice issues that you face, I face. The taxes that you pay, I pay. Being married, having children, everything in that nature, I experience the same thing. But I think that you cannot walk in my shoes and you don't understand me. And I think that when people don't understand people, they fear it.
Yeah, I was listening to you read this story. I've been thinking about this story, and I was thinking, wow, the programming that people receive, right? And have received, because as probably the oldest person sitting at the panel, there's a time in my life when those numbers would have been really bad. Really, really, really bad. I was surprised actually to see some of the percentages. I'm like, wow, when did that even happen? And so I'm thinking, well, then that's a good sign, right? Because if in being more out and visible and having discussions has made the needle move that far, then we can move it a little farther, you know? And I think it comes to not you as much as me and my spaces defending Black trans people. And making sure that my family knows when I'm home for dinner that if somebody makes a comment, that that's not okay. You don't have to be there for it to not be okay.
Agreed.
Right? And I think that as we learn to do things like that, it helps to change that, so that one day someone who doesn't understand your story at all doesn't have to, but they can understand you deserve health care. You deserve to be able to get an education and a job and pay your taxes and the things that you were talking about, right?
I think
so. I think we have our role.
I mean, you said it. Black trans women have done enough.
You know,
they've done enough to justify their existence. They've done enough to justify, you know, treating equally in healthcare and everything. They've done enough. Like at this point, and that's what's always frustrated me. My own frustrations about the queer community. It's like at this point, trans people in general have done enough.
No.
And if we as cis people or however you identify, if you can't pick up the banner at this point,
right,
just to help and actually say, yes, we're defending their humanity because their humanity is our humanity.
Exactly.
So this study, I will agree, I was expecting the numbers to be worse. So I'm glad about that at least.
I thought the numbers were promising, actually. 30-something% of people who thought it was just right. A lot of those people can be moved over, in my opinion. They aren't necessarily saying, you know, it's gone too far. They're not necessarily saying that it's right where it needs to be, but saying that it's just right now. I mean, that's promising. I thought that number would be a lot smaller.
Well, and that to me means there's more people with us than against, right? Like if we take the third that say that we need to do more, the third that say, you know, it's just enough, like, that's the majority of folks. And I think, Adrianna, your comment about the taxes you pay, I pay, I think that is so poignant because I'm assuming that none of us at this table are very, very rich, right? And I know that means that we are paying and giving into this government, into this society that continues to take away from from us or from certain people.
Yes.
And I think that that's disgusting. I think that we're also under some impression that just because you don't understand someone's story or identify with their story, that you have to be mean and hateful and discriminatory. And I think that we need to be in a place of accountability that's like, it's not about you. Like, you don't get to act like that just because this is not your story, just because you've never experienced or you don't think you know a trans person, you don't get to act like this in this space. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next week, queer up LGBTQ plus civil rights. LGBTQ plus Black History Month. Remembering Bayard Rustin, civil rights leader and gay activist.
To you, the executive director of the March on Washington, the man who organized this whole thing, Mr. Bayard Rustin.
That we have effective civil rights legislation, no compromise, no filibuster, and that it includes public accommodation, decent housing, integrated education, FEPC, and the right to vote. What do you say?
First lesson. Well, as an African-American gay man, and to a certain degree as a Quaker, Bayard was faced with discrimination and with prejudice throughout his life.
First lesson is don't try to repeat what you've done because we're in a different period. That's the first lesson. Second lesson is that protest is no substitute for the ballot box, which we have now. When we didn't have the ballot box, protest was the logical way. Once you have the ballot box, protest is useless. And the fact is you cannot get blacks into the ballot box. A third of the blacks who can vote go to vote. That's our problem.
This year, we celebrate LGBTQ plus Black History Month by remembering the personalities who are the trailblazers of the community and contributed to its upliftment. Tonight, we're going to talk about Bayard Rustin. He fought racism, sexism, and classism all his life as a civil rights activist, friend of Martin Luther King Jr., and organizer of the March on Washington. His vision of nonviolence was breathtakingly broad. He was a labor unionist, a socialist, a pacifist, and later in life, a gay rights advocate. Today, scholars will call Rustin an intersectionalist, a man who understood the complex effects of multiple forms of discrimination, including racism, sexism, and classism. Rustin was present at the creation of a host of pivotal American liberation movements. He helped found the Congress of Racial Equality and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, two civil rights organizations that were focused on ending the Jim Crow era of racial segregation. However, Rustin's homosexuality had always been an issue, and not just to his opponents on the American right or to J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI. Many progressive activists who were open-minded on matters relating to civil and labor rights were much less so when it came to Rustin's sexuality. He dedicated his life to helping, as he put it, quote, people in trouble, whomever and wherever they might be. Queer News Tonight, Black Edition, celebrates Bayard Rustin for LGBTQ Black History Month. I find Bayard Rustin to probably be one of the folks in civil rights history that I kind of resonate with the most. And just the comments that he made regarding the filibuster just brings me back to the conversation today, where we, just a year ago, we were fighting over getting a massive Voting Rights Act passed on a federal level. However, the filibuster remains the issue today. And so it just goes to show that this conversation is not just, the conversation is still the same. We're in a different time period, but we're still fighting the same battles.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see this tonight. I just wish that it wasn't only during Black History Month, because a lot of white people got a lot of freedom from Black civil rights activists in the 60s. And he was one of them. And at the end, actually, he ended up separating from Martin Luther King Jr. because of his sexuality. That the next steps that they wanted to take, they didn't want it to constantly be centered around. And he stepped away and said, you know what, I'll go and I'll be an advocate then for gay rights.
That's right.
But for me to think about the courage that it takes for a man like him back in that time to sit up and to speak so openly about equality for all. He wasn't talking about equality for him. He was talking about equality for all. He was talking about access for all, right? And didn't have himself centered in the conversation ever. It was about other people, even though he was the one being discriminated against, right? When I think about things like that, it just humbles me, right? And helps me stay in check with who I am and where I'm at and what am I actually doing and why am I actually doing it. Right?
I mean, that's the thing with advocacy, right? You have to be careful.
Yeah.
And you have to remember sometimes you have to protect yourself.
Right.
And I think that there's something that resonates with him and that movement and the current movement now, that you look at some of the, I mean, I guess you'd call it social justice warriors or whatever, and how it's a very limited scope. Very often it's very, I think about gay marriage very often, and one of the statistics that I remember so distinctly is how donations to all of the campaigns that were fighting for gay marriage, donations just stopped. When gay marriage got passed, they just stopped and dried up. And so all of these things, you start to realize that you have to, I hate saying protect yourself and look out for yourself, but certain times communities, especially communities of color, we do have to look out for ourselves. And when you're a marginalized community within a marginalized community, it can feel like the world's against you. But when I see stories like his, it's that reminder of, we've been fighting this fight and we've been surviving this fight, so we'll just keep on fighting this fight.
I mean, I would wonder what he would say about the gay rights movement, because it's like, what a place to be in, a rock and a hard place, right? Like, you're fighting for your life and in civil rights and with Black people that don't accept you. And then we also know that the gay rights movement is also a place that is so white dominant and focused on marriage equity, right? Yes. When there's so many other survivability issues that are on the table for Black folks. So I wonder what he would say about like what that felt like to be like, what am I fighting for? I'm trying to fight for all of me.
They were actually lucky. He, Josephine Baker, other Black gay civil rights, were actually lucky because they learned a lot from the French.
Yes.
And they were coming from a very different perspective than even a lot of people are today. So I think that his perspective would be one of keep fighting the fight. Like, don't let them back you down. And to your point, we have to always come from a place that we have to operate from a place that no one's coming to save us, right? We have to be willing to stand up for ourselves at all times.
It also is a reminder to me that I feel like there are so many conversations around and in Black communities that act like gayness is a new thing or is a new thing. And, the ancestors like Bayard, Rustin, and indigenous communities remind us that out or not, we've been here, right? Like, we've been here, we've been fighting hand in hand, side by side, over dinner, like, we've been here.
Oh my gosh. So next, let's clear up the USA view. Ooh. Oh, that's always great. Why is the Austin Police Department LGBT Criminal Justice World Conference important to Black LGBTQ plus community members? The Austin Police Department, in collaboration with the Lesbian and Gay Peace Officers Association, LGPOA, has announced the 4th World LGBTIQ plus Conference for Criminal Justice Professionals will be held in Austin, Texas in 2025. This will also be the first time this conference has been held in the United States. The conference is organized by the group Proud to Be Your Friend, which has held these events around the world since 2016. The Austin Police Department has been working to establish a strong relationship with the diverse community through innovative programs like creating the first and only LGBTQIA+ Peace Officers Association in Texas. However, though Austin is diverse in a lot of ways, it lacks Black professionals. According to U.S. Census Bureau statistics, less than 10% of Austin's population is Black. Organizing the World LGBTQ+ Conference for Criminal Justice Professionals in 2025 will be a great step towards training new police cadets to understand that 95% of day-to-day policing is more akin to social services than policing, and that the police academy should incorporate anti-racism and cultural diversity training. The Austin Police Department has had difficulty with resignations and recruitment in recent years.
What I've enjoyed most is listening to those presenters who have talked about not just what the problems are in terms of the relationship between our community and the police, but what the solutions are.
This conference was incredible in terms of they brought together historical context, advocates, people from different communities to be able to share their lived experience so that we can actually learn from that.
From the minute we started, I learned tangible things that I can take away and implement at home. The connections I've made, the fun that I've had with other delegates, it's been mind-blowing.
I loved listening to all the amazing ideas that are happening all over the world right now. Incredible innovations happening in policing to protect different types of vulnerable communities.
Being around people that have similar experiences to you, who you don't need to explain yourself to. We understand each other as queer people, but we also understand each other as police officers.
And when you're able to come here and look at an international conference of literally hundreds of other people that are exactly like you, it emboldens you, it empowers you, it fills you back up.
All right, so obviously I'll be first to say this. That was a quite vanilla affair. And I think that speaks to the larger issue of policing, which is not just in Austin, but in most communities in America, it's still a very white dominant establishment, which now we're in a time and place where they're pulling back from anti-racism. They're pulling back from all of these things now. And it's, I don't know, it's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. I come from a small town in North Carolina where it is still a kind of good old boy culture where you're genuinely nervous, right? If somebody pulls you over. So I'm excited that this is happening. I do feel that this could have been probably done in a different place. Maybe Atlanta, where they're building Cop City right now, which I don't know if viewers know what Cop City is, but there are much bigger problems, and I think they're probably going to address at this summit. But, you know, here's hoping that it gets to a larger audience.
You know what really stuck out to me? The statistic of 95% of Austin Police Department services going towards social services. To me, I don't think that's the job of the police. Right. And the fact that that amount of its resources are going, you know, to police for that.
Should go to social services.
Right. Go to housing or education. Right. So that was just a little wild to see.
I mean, that's a thing. We just this week, right? When I'm talking about police and guns, they say it's not guns, it's a mental health issue. They just had a vote this week in Congress where the entire Republican House of Representatives voted against expanding funding for healthcare and mental health care for young people. So I don't understand, like, what do they want people to do exactly?
Not only mental health care for young people, mental health care for the actual police officers.
Ooh, yes.
Because that's a very, very tough job that they're not trained for. And so they end up being a profession that has high rates of substance abuse and high rates of domestic abuse and high rates of suicide. The statistic that stuck out to me was, it said Austin's a very diverse city, but only 10% is black. And I'm thinking, well, who else lives there? Like,
black professionals.
Well, Latinx folks will be there in Austin.
Oh, that's what.
So that's my thought.
That's my thought too, but that's a problem too, because I mean, being in South Florida, we have an understanding that even within the Latin and Latin community, they themselves have their own race issues and more likely than not identify with more of a white rhetoric anyway. So that's something that you face also.
If this group is coming here and if we're going to talk about policing, it's time to talk about, right?
Let's talk
because
about it.
Most people don't understand policing. Most people don't understand the history of policing. Most people don't understand
why they exist.
Why they even exist. Most people don't understand how they've been used. Yeah. I was watching a Netflix show the other night about the beating in LA way back in the 90s of Rodney King. And they said, you know, in LA, when they decided that they were going to participate in the war on drugs, they hired police officers from the South because they knew that they were racist and brought them to Los Angeles and taught them violence, right? And then you see something like that happen and people go, how could that happen? It's not happening by accident.
It's still happening.
Well, it's not happening by accident.
No.
It's happening intentionally. People know what's going on.
And when I think about it, it's great that they're having it in Austin, right?
Right.
But then you want to think about what is their intent? You know, you have to be intentional about it. So why are you having it in Austin when there are so many other places in the country that really need this, where there's only 10% Black people there? You know, it seems like maybe their intent was not to be inclusive to Black people.
But then again, maybe Austin was the city that accepted them.
That's right.
Maybe other cities in the South were like,
I find that hard to believe. With a Governor Abbott in Texas.
Yes.
I find that hard.
Their governor is just like the DeSantis here.
Right.
And I'll say, I think from Austin's perspective, right? So if you think of the context of Texas, Austin is basically like the South Florida of Texas. Like they are the most liberal, open spot in Texas. So to me, this feels almost like an act of resistance for what's currently going on there as well, that I feel like they would court something like this because it's almost saying that we're trying to be that safe zone, unfortunately. But I mean, we need those safe zones in multiple cities.
That'd be like Wilton Manors hosting this.
All right.
5 Black people.
Right.
I'll say I'm kind of glad they had it here so they can see how policing in America really is, and they should really bring it to the South so they can see how it is here.
Right.
The rest of the world thinks it's insane how policing is here at this point. So.
Right. And now what we're going to do, which is not too much of a segue, we're going to queer up South Florida and Florida, talking about the South. Can queer communities like Wilton Manors be a place where Black LGBTQ plus can thrive?
This is the first march I've seen in the city of Wilton Manors. Do you think that we are closer to getting people to understand that Black lives really do matter?
I really do think that we're getting closer, because this march here and this rally isn't just about Black Lives Matter throughout the United States and the nation. It's about Black Lives Matter here in Wilton Manors for our Black trans and our Black gays as well. So the fact that our community has recognized that shows that Wilton Manors has the courage and the ability to acknowledge what's going on and willing to move forward.
The first thing we have to do is we have to get up every day and decide what are we doing to help better the situation.
Yes, and we all are here for one reason, and that's unity. And thank God that everybody was able to come together today, whether it is out of the love and courage that they have for their friends and their allies, or just for themselves. We're all here to speak up, and we could only be grateful that we have that chance to do so.
People who live in and around Wilton Manors, which is known as the gayest place on earth, like to think that they are the most inclusive and accepting community. However, that is not necessarily the truth. The community is subject to white dominant decision making. The Black LGBTQ plus population of Wilton Manors still has not found its rightful place. Both the community and the Wilton Manors administration can take steps to embrace diversity and promote acceptance. Action has to be taken against the discriminatory language and approach toward the Black LGBTQ plus community. Attacks on the establishments owned by the community must be looked into thoroughly in order to create an environment of justice within Wilton Manors. This will be the right way of celebrating Black History Month. Tonight, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network is hosting a Black community town hall and roundtable to discuss a community's approach to the Black community, especially a community that is so identified as a progressive, as an LGBTQ plus community. And this is really, I think I work in healthcare, so I always think about the infection, how we tackle disease, right? And it's always, you have to get to the root cause of the disease, right? We can't keep giving you Band-Aids. If you have diabetes, you have to lose weight. You can't just take insulin, right? You have to change your diet. You can't just take a pill. And when I think about the larger discussions about race and racism in America, and then I look at a little community like Wilton Manors, and I go, you know, it's a great place to make change. I'm always reminded, because I work in healthcare from the 80s, a lot of these guys I know, you know, we're talking about not healed people. right? I know a lot of people who still can't go home on the holidays, right? They've never been accepted by the family. So you're talking about people that have a lot of stuff going on. This is a process, I think, in Wilton Manors that we should be having this discussion. I think is nothing but healing for everyone involved, including the people that you may feel you're receiving the most discrimination from, right? I think there's a lot of conversations that need to happen up there. And I think through that, we'll find some common ground for everybody when we realize that we really do have a lot more in common, right? There's a lot of things going on up there.
It's true. I think that, you know, not being born and raised here, right? So I always give things like that context. I meet so many people here that are older, that came from other areas, and a lot of the decision making, as you were saying, a lot of the decision making is made from older white men. I mean, that's just a fact. And one of the things that I learned very quickly in life is that just because you identify as queer does not mean that you're automatically not racist or carry racial issues or carry those things with you, because that's a completely different track in your mind. And unfortunately, it feels like a lot of times, especially in the Wilton Manors area, that is an issue, right? That's something that you can see just in the marketing for events. That's something that you can see in the types of events they have. There's nothing that's catering to, there's nothing that's really, you know, Black friendly. It's kind of saying very clearly, like, we don't technically, you know, you can come in, but we're not really going to invite you in.
I'd also say, just to add a little bit of context too, Wilton Manors didn't used to always be so white. It used to also be a very Black and Asian community, and they pushed those people out over time. And now we have the issues we have now with violence and with you know, unconscious racism, they say, which is still racism at the end of the day.
I mean, I don't know anything about Wilton Manors, but I know that back in the 90s, say in New York, when we were fighting against the AIDS epidemic, the conversation went to white and male, because we live in America in this white male patriarchal society. And that's who they would listen to. They wouldn't listen to anybody else, right? And so I think Wilton Manors is like this microcosm of the larger problem.
Well, when you think about the question that they asked, can we thrive in that community? And what's the statement they always say when they say, if it's not built by us, it's not for us? However they say that comment. I think about how many Black politicians or commissioners or mayors are there? How many Black businesses are there? How many Black clubs are there? I think that's like zero. I remember a time when, you know, a lot of the Black promoters and things would go to Wilton Manors and they would have Black nights there. It doesn't exist anymore. They've moved out of Wilton Manors. And I guess that's a really good question to ask. Why are they no longer in Wilton Manors? And a lot of people just said that we weren't welcome. So I don't know. When they say, can we thrive in that community?
Well, it's money too, right? Hard. Think about that. There's money. I mean, I think about some of the drag performers that go and perform at Cloud9, right? They make a lot of money, and there are a lot of people there. And you sit there and watch it, and because I live near Cloud9, I'm like, it's amazing that you can gather all these people out west for this event. And Wilton just sits there crickets, right? And eventually you tell people, I mean, I'm just be really real. Black folks, if you tell them you don't want them, they're not going to keep on coming. Like, they're just not. They're not, I'm not going to go where I'm not welcome. They have done, in just the decade I've lived here, events that used to be common are no longer here. I think about some place like PJ's, right? Anybody who's been here long enough, that's moved from location to location. And when they finally made it to the Drive, and it felt great to have a place on the Drive, everyone else talked about it as if it was a leper colony. Like, they looked at you sideways if you said you were going there, as if like there's something wrong or it's dirty or something. And you're sitting there like, you do realize this is pretty racist what you're saying,
and
right?
I would also say, I mean, as a Wilton Manors resident, I remember talking to one of the commissioners who had asked me, like, do you feel unsafe in Wilton? And I said, I don't feel unsafe because I'm gay. Like, I can walk down the street with my fiance, nobody's bothering us, everybody gets to be gay, there's rainbow flags everywhere. And I said, but I've been pulled over in Wilton Manors by the cops for nothing. Like, so it's like, I'm still Black. Like, I cannot erase that just because of Wilton. And when you ask about the commissioners, like, I just did a quick Google search. I don't see that there's ever been a Black commissioner in incorporated Wilton Manors. And right now we are governed by a commission of 5 cis white men, one of which is heterosexual. The rest are not. And it's like, how can you call yourself the most progressive and inclusive if you are not setting up leadership and mentorship and grooming for somebody else to take over once you're gone? And the answer is not when a Black person says to you, like, why are we missing from the table, to be like, well, then you should run. No. That's not what I'm here for. But like, how are we mentoring that? Or how are you intentionally saying, this space, this shop, this park, this whatever is set aside for a Black business owner?
There's been one Black commissioner, and he served, I think, 1 term at Wilton Manors. And I also wanted to say, you know, I was the only Black queer person to run to represent the area in the legislature. It took me 2 runs to even win the city. When I came into the city at first, it was like, we never had a Black candidate come here, a Black gay candidate. So the politics, like, about the politics.
Right, but you have to remember that those are things that we have to do then. And you can't leave it up to them. And you can't expect them to carve out a space for you. They're not going to do it. They don't even know how to do that, right? I wouldn't know how to do that if somebody Asian came to me and said, I just looked at your board and there's no Asians on your, you need to carve out a space. I'd say, no, you carve out the space and I will implement it. But I don't know because I'm not you, right?
Well, and I would disagree with that, because if you were on the board and someone comes to you and says, this is all men, there are no women, like, how do we address that? You being a board member has the power to sit and have that conversation and then create something, right? Like, you have the power to. So even if you don't,
space for a woman,
even if you
to say create women's things, right? I'm not going to try to do that because I'm not a woman.
Of course.
So we made a space for a woman. So
but what I'm saying is, with all of the city property that exists in Wilton Manors, whether it's parks, whether it's, you know, buildings, whether it's whatever, all these empty spots that are just sitting in Wilton Manors, why can't a city commission say, in the same way y'all can lease land to whoever you want for $1 a year, that like, this is our incubator for Black businesses in Wilton? Like, you have the power to do. No one is asking the white commission to put on Black events. No one's asking them to do that. And we're just saying, like, step out the side, give us the space, because we know that you could do it for yourselves and what you want. So give us the space for us to be able to do it.
But have they said they wouldn't? Has somebody come to them with a plan and said, I want that space and I want it for this?
Yes.
And that's what I want.
Yes. There has been people that have tried to get buildings there that they've been turned down.
Okay. See, now that's an issue.
They turned down. And I don't necessarily agree with what you said before. I do believe that people have to be intentional and have to say, okay, we want Black people to come here. Let's have a Black office here, this, that, and the other. I know there's several organizations that I became a part of that there was never a trans person there until they were like, you know what, let's be intentional. Let's make a space for a trans woman. And in came me, and then I brought people. So sometimes you have to be intentional about that. Or it's not going to, or it's not going to happen, and not all the time.
I mean,
you have to move with intention,
and
right?
Like, you're going to court, right? Because that's the thing. If you're going to, even from a business perspective, if you're going to court businesses and you're going to expect businesses and you're going to claim diversity and you're going to claim to be progressive is not 5 white people, right? And once again, like I said, it started this, right? Queer and race are not the same thing. They're not the same thing.
And how long, going back to the question, can we thrive? The question is, how long are we going to continue to let them not give us a place at a table and continue to bring them money?
That's right.
Continue to go to their club. Continue to go to their business. Continue to use their organization.
That is an absolute. That is an absolute
point.
point.
Get a lesbian woman to become the mayor. I'm just.
Can we have a lesbian woman do anything?
I think that that's a very good question that I even ask myself on a regular basis as a resident of Wilton Manors, because I can't move, right? It's so expensive everywhere. But it's like, how often do we put the energy into being on the one hand saying, I live here, so I deserve to have things here that are for me, even if I have to build it for my people. So it's like, even in doing, for example, Pride Fest, that was 1,000 predominantly Black and brown people that came to the drive. That also some of the feedback that we got was those folks were like, we didn't even know this existed in Wilton. Like, we don't come to Wilton. That's right. We took a risk on coming here for this thing today, and this was great. But then there's nothing else. Like, that's not a regular thing. But then the flip side of that is the commissioners and everybody gets to say, like, look what we did as a city.
Click, click.
When you, right. You get your pictures, you come, you do your thing. They get to put it on the website and say, we're not racist because look at us right here. So it's like, how do we move forward, and how do we do something that allows us the space to thrive and the space to feel like I live here and I'm not going to be displaced by you people. And also,
I see the card, but I just have a quick question because I'm not from Wilton and I don't go up there that often. Are we trying to create like separate but equal? Or are we trying to create inclusion? Because I hear separate but equal. I want to have Black business so Black people have somewhere to go, and the white people can go there, and the Black people can go there.
No.
But is that what we're shooting for? I'm confused.
I don't think that's it at all. But I think if a Black person wants to own a business in Wilton Manors, they should be allowed to.
Yeah,
shouldn't
for
be
sure.
hurdles on top of
right. That part. It shouldn't be the barriers.
That's what happens quite often. I mean, unfortunately, that's very characteristic in a lot of communities that are predominantly white, is that it's, in business, they call it a culture fit, right? Is this a culture fit? If we're going to grant you this license, if we're going to do these things, and very often the people that decide the culture fit are not people that look like us.
Right.
And that's the bigger issue.
Not yet.
Well, the fact that, folks are concerned about any event happening in Wilton, and we have a noise ordinance of 11 p.m. and that residents are waiting by the phone at 11:01 for particularly Black events.
That's right.
To be able to call to get them shut down in Wilton, right? Like that neighbors are complaining tells you that if the city is going to stand by a statement of diversity and inclusion, that means that you got to stand in the paint and make that happen. And be intentional and meaningful about making that happen in your city, and not just being like, well, we accept everybody. Accepting everybody is different than saying, let me open the door. Let me give you your first $2 that you need to make this happen. Let me make sure nobody comes to bother you because this is your space right here.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure. Thank you.
This evening, we celebrate LGBTQ+ Black History Month with this special Queer News Tonight Black edition. We continue to add to the leading voices of our diverse community as anchors and reporters. Let's welcome Francia, a talented attorney and leading LGBTQ+ activist in protection of marginalized communities. He has experience with the Supreme Court and is unique in that he is also a music performer. Next is John Buckley. Well known in the South Florida community as an activist and leading voice for the Black LGBTQ+ community, he has been recognized and awarded many times for his work at the Unity Coalition. Next is Jeff Delmay. Very well known as a political activist for our LGBTQ+ community, he famously was the plaintiff along with his husband, Todd Delmay, in the Florida marriage equality decision that made queer marriage legalized in Florida. Active in the Hollywood LGBTQ+ Council and My Hollywood Pride, Smart Ride, and many other organizations, he recently was invited to the White House for the South Lawn signing of marriage equality with the president and vice president. Following Queer News Tonight Black Edition, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network will host a special Black Town Hall and Roundtable in Wilton Manors that will focus on the needs and issues that face our LGBTQ+ community.
Let's queer up the courts. Mississippi wants to remove elected judges from primarily Black city.
You will not get away with taking what belongs to people of color.
Jackson representatives in the state legislature have been outspoken about the bill since it was filed. In statements released this morning, the Jackson delegation in the House and the Senate condemned the legislation. Hinds County judges also voiced their opposition today.
Lawmakers in Mississippi are at odds over a bill, HB 1020, that would create an unelected, state-appointed court system in a district within Jackson, a majority Black city, with some concern that the move smacks of a modern-day Jim Crow regime. Representative Trey Lamar, the bill's sponsor, says that under the legislation that passed the State House to expand the district, the makeup would be about 55% Black. if the bill becomes law, Mississippi Supreme Court Chief Justice Michael Randolph could appoint judges and State Attorney General Linvich would appoint prosecutors, unlike in other areas of the state where judges and prosecutors are elected. State Democratic leaders say efforts like this are about control, not about helping the people of Jackson. And I want to bring the legal perspective. I was reading over the HB 1020 bill, and it is very, very problematic. First of all, it allows for the creation of a new judicial district. In essence, you're creating a city within a city. You're using taxpayer dollars, most of them are black, as we read in the story, in order to create powers that expand, according to the ACLU of Mississippi, expand undemocratically the legislature's power. We're talking about the ability for the chief judge of the Supreme Court to appoint judges who are unelected and who are unaccountable. And also, prosecutors could simply just issue an affidavit and prosecute people on already a heavily policed area. It also expands the police department, so it gives them a broader territory. So this bill, I hope it passed the House of Representatives and now it moves to the Senate floor. Let's see what happens, but let's hope that it doesn't go through.
I smell a federal lawsuit.
Absolutely. The ACLU of Mississippi actually released a statement saying that they're probably going to sue the state, and they issued the basis on which they're going to sue, which is a violation of the state constitution, section 156, which grants the legislature an ability to create inferior courts. But this is no inferior court. Here we're talking about a court who has jurisdiction over cases that are brought against the state. So they're protecting themselves. They're allowing to create another body within a body that's already elected by majority black people.
A special court.
Yep.
Well, we have to be very careful, because if we don't fight this and Mississippi doesn't fight this, then other states will just follow suit. And next thing you know, as we see what's going on in Florida, they're copycat states, and they all want to, they'll do the same thing. So
absolutely,
we have to throw all our support to Mississippi. Even within the state, they have to do what they have to do. But we're a southern state too in Florida,
indeed,
and we need to pay attention to that and lend our support and our fight with them as well.
Right. It just feels like so much very overt retribution against black folks that are rising up and maintaining a culture of resistance. Jackson, Mississippi has long been, just a black resistance capital in the South. Mississippi generally, but specifically Jackson, what Lumumba has done there and his family over all these decades, it is wild to see that overtly these folks are like, no, we're coming for you.
Yeah.
And to me, it's always a lesson of, I heard someone say once that voting is harm reduction. Like, voting will not free black people, to be clear. But we also can't ignore it as a system that we have to play in, a system that we have to be strategic in, to protect our people as we can. And also, what are the other ways, the creative ways that we can say, we got to act outside of this? Because even the voting itself is like created by these people, and they're going to do what they can to make sure that we can't vote. So,
absolutely.
Next, let's queer up the USA View. Pauli Murray will be the first black queer person on U.S. currency.
About Pauli Murray.
Pauli was a writer, a lawyer, a priest, a poet. Pauli was a feisty woman.
My name is Pauli Murray. My whole history has been a struggle in a society dominated by the ideas that blacks were inferior to whites and women were inferior to men.
Pauli was way ahead of the times.
I chose for my senior paper, should Plessy versus Ferguson be overruled? My little argument went to the Supreme Court.
Y'all see all of the different folks that are in this room? That is made possible by Pauli Murray.
If you rip away everything, oppression is the business of not respecting one's personhood. For my first 2 years, I was the only woman in the law school. They didn't even let me talk.
Thurgood Marshall is talking about Jim Crow, and she says, what I'm experiencing is Jane Crow.
Pauli Murray was not just an amazing lawyer or a badass feminist, but also a queer, non-binary person.
Sitting in front of Murray's notes, the turmoil and the suffering
This is a feeling I know well. Scholars who have written about Pauli largely still use feminine pronouns. I don't know what pronouns Pauli would say.
Trans and gender non-binary people have always been a part of our American context. So did y'all just think that your generation invented it?
But if this country is to survive, we must live together in harmony.
Pauli may not have realized they would be a beacon for so many folks.
Pauli's time had not come. We have to work for a world in which it does come.
You say I can't.
Pauli Murray, non-binary Black activist, lawyer, priest, and poet, will be featured on the quarter in the next round of U.S. Mint's American Women Quarters program, making Murray the first Black queer person to appear on the U.S. currency. In 1977, she became one of the first women and the first African-American woman to be ordained as an Episcopal priest. Pauli Murray died of cancer in Pittsburgh on July 1st, 1985. Their autobiography, Song in a Weary Throat, An American Pilgrimage, was published posthumously in 1987. Murray's Quarter will be issued in 2024. Others in 2024 group are Patsy Takamoto Mink, the first woman of color to serve in Congress, Dr. Mary Edwards Walker, a Civil War-era surgeon, women's rights advocate, and abolitionist, Zikala Sa, a writer, composer, educator, and activist for Native Americans' rights, and Celia Cruz, the Cuban-American singer known as the Queen of Salsa. This is amazing. You can see that they were a trailblazer, and it's great that they're finally highlighting the many powerful Black women who have taken a stand and led the way for many of us.
Well, did anybody see the documentary yet? My name is Pauli Murray. Excellent. I'm not ashamed, but I'm sad to say that this is the only reason why I got to know Pauli Murray is because of this documentary. I happened to stumble on it, and it was magnificent. What an example of a woman or a non-binary individual in this case that is the strength behind the power and the message with the unsung hero. You know, you see Thurgood Marshall used their words, RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, used their words from her research and from what she had put together. And, it's just the example of how women have constantly been in the background, and now we're putting them in the forefront, really on some money, on some currency. So I'm excited about this.
I kind of saw some of the backlash to this because, the U.S. announces what the 2024, who those folks are going to be. And I saw some of the social media backlash about why are we, demonizing America by putting queer people in the currency. And so this is a trend that we're going to continue to see. But it's finally, I'm really happy to see that they're actually, unsung heroes throughout our history are being recognized. There are so many people, but like you said, I didn't even know anything about Pauli Murray until a couple of weeks ago when I saw people screaming about this. And so I think, we need to highlight a lot more of those people.
And going back a few years under the Obama administration, there were plans to put abolitionist and former slave Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. Those plans were delayed under He Who Shall Not Be Named's presidency, number 45. And there was a memo that Secretary Yellen from the Treasury Department issued to the internal employees saying that the bill will become effective in 2030. So in a couple of years, we're going to see Harriet Tubman. And last year, we saw Dr. Maya Angelou on the quarter as the first African-American. So this program is amazing. And as the Afro-Latinx representation on the table, I'm so excited to see Celia Cruz, the Queen of Salsa. I am dressed in honor of her. She wears a lot of fabulous colors and sequins. So today I put on my Instagram that Afro-Latinx history is Black history, and indeed is being recognized by the U.S. government.
Absolutely. I have some complicated feelings about this because I remember when Harriet Tubman was a conversation on the $20 bill and folks were like, what is that feeling that describes that we were once currency and here we are back again as currency, right? Like it was, and that stuck with me to be like, oh, you're right, and so many other countries that have women on their currency, but also are far more progressive in their equity and far more progressive in the women that they've had in leadership. So what does it look like to say, yes, we prioritize women, but then not actually do it in action? When we've never had a woman president, yes, we have a first vice president that's a woman, but when we look at so much leadership that's like, you know, the currency is one thing and maybe it's the easy thing versus actually stepping aside and allowing women to lead, to lead in these spaces. So,
and I was reading that coins are easier than actual currency, paper currency, because for paper currency, you have to make sure that it's counterfeit proof. And that takes a longer process, whereas with coins, it's a little bit easier. So way to go in using this MINTS program. I think it's valid until 2025, so let's keep going.
Right. Well, let's queer up the road to Stonewall. These are the biggest issues that LGBTQ plus Black community will face in 2023. Black, transgender, and gender nonconforming people face some of the highest levels of discrimination of all transgender people. The task force released the report with the National Black Justice Coalition, the NBJC, and the National Center of Transgender Equality, NCTE, showing widespread discriminations experienced by transgender and gender nonconforming people across the board. Black transgender people had an extremely high unemployment rate of 26%. A startling 41% of Black respondents said they had experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. Apart from the socioeconomic discrimination, the year also presents a few political and legal challenges in front of the LGBTQ plus community, as a few states are passing and forming anti-LGBTQ plus bills and reforms. The ACLU is tracking 321 anti-LGBTQ bills in the US in 2023. There are significant issues that face our LGBTQ plus Black community in 2023. Well, we are the furthest east and south state, but we're right in the middle of all of this, of all this anti-LGBTQ plus, and it's just in our faces. And frankly, I struggle with what the heck to do. What can I do? What do I call myself an activist, but you know, what can I do to stop this? And I feel a little helpless, but I also feel like we need to put the issues on the table, identify them, all of us, you know, really get educated about what that is, and at least get the conversation, because the five of us here today, we may be educated, we may know what's going on, but does our Black and brown neighbors, do they know? Are they paying attention? Our LGBTQ plus siblings, you know, just kind of walking around thinking life is okay, it's not affecting them, but it really is.
Right. I remember someone saying once that, especially for Florida, that the government is making financial decisions for all of our homes, and everyone should be scared about that, because it might be LGBTQ folks today, it's been Black folks, it's been women, but at what end will they go to say you don't deserve to eat, play, rest, make money, you know, whatever? Like, the government is saying you don't deserve to eat effectively. And, you know, we've talked here on the show before about Republicans claiming to be the party of limited government, and yet, you know, this is what they're doing to people, is saying like, you, not you, in large swaths. And it's like, how do we preach that message? That it's not about, it is about the culture wars, but also it's like, it's not about that, because some people will politically be aligned. It's about the financial decisions. It's about the money. It's about the taxes. It's about all of those different things that the government is coming for. And we should not be okay with our government deciding who should work and who should not, who should make money and who should not, and different things like that.
The fact that
disaster.
That one, that he's asking for the gender markers for college students. On top of the comment of Black, when he made the comment about Black education and taking that out of the curriculum, you also have our transgender siblings who cannot afford to get hormone therapy. They're getting their rights stripped from them little by little. So, to me, these are the real issues that we're gonna face. And how do we come together to do this to put a stop to what's being put in place?
It's a very hard question. I mean, I wish I can say this is what we do. As we know, like, it's a couple million people in this state who, you know, unfortunately believe the lies they've been told with this culture war nonsense. I think what you said makes a lot of sense, Jasmine, taking it back to economics, and talking to those people on the other side of the aisle and saying, listen, well, they might be coming for us right now with culture war issues, but your light bill is still high. I mean, in that rural community you're living in, you still have lead water. You still have
$8 eggs are fun.
Like, the gas still high. I mean, so at the end of the day, what are they doing about you? So if we can bring people to the table and say, look, we're not enemies. I know they're trying to paint, you know, Black people and LGBTQ people as the enemies, the degenerate, all of this crazy stuff that we've heard before in history. But at the end of the day, we're still fighting the same battles, and we're living in the same communities, and even if it might be 200 miles away, it's the same issues.
And the name of this report is Injustice at Every Turn, and that's exactly what we experience, right? So our community is already impoverished. We face class discrimination, we face race discrimination, and this report shows that when you, on top of that, add gender and gender identity, that compounds and it creates more difficulty for our communities. The big issue that I think we're going to face is homelessness, and what to do about it. I mean, homelessness, because of the cost of living in this country, and especially in Florida, is rising. What to do about it? Legislatures need to work on anti-housing discrimination bills, and developers need to continue adding programs to allow for low-income folks to come into these beautiful buildings, and we deserve to be in those spaces as well at a cost that is more permissive to us.
Well, and Francia, to your point, especially as the attorney here, that's intersectionality.
Absolutely.
Kimberly Crenshaw gave us that as a legal framework, not just, you know, part of our woke politics, but that is a legal framework that says my identities cannot be stripped from each other.
Absolutely.
I exist here as all of these different things at once. So if you discriminate on one part of it, it's all of me that you're discriminating on. So I think that's very, very interesting that you bring the legal aspect into it.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it for today's news in the LGBTQ plus community on the world's first and one daily LGBTQ plus evening news show. We focus attention on LGBTQ plus Black History Month. This news show is unique in the entire world.
Queer News Tonight, Black Edition, provides a needed space to explore where our Black LGBTQ plus community is headed. That includes our Black, trans, lesbian, gay, political, youth, senior, health, faith, and business communities. All interconnected, to your point, from the perspective of people of color and LGBTQ+.
If our community is important to you, share this news with your friends and family. Are you, like most of America, part of our very large television audience watching this live LGBTQ+ news broadcast right now on Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, and Amazon Fire TV?
Queer News Tonight is the only live LGBTQ+ digital television show in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support. If our community is to grow, we must tell our stories and bring them to the attention of the broader world.
This is the only place in the world that tells these types of LGBTQ+ stories in motion and sound. It is the passion of Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, and Queer News Tonight.
I'm your anchor, Jasmen Rogers, and on behalf of these LGBTQ+ reporters, the anchors of Queer News Tonight, including Adrianna Tender, Elijah Manley, Auntie Main, Paul Thomas, Francia, John Buckley, and Jeff Delmay, we will see you daily at 8 p.m. To our Black LGBTQ+ world, we wish you a beautiful good night.
Good night.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth